At the Scottish Poetry Library, we got really caught up in the excitement of the Euros. Ahead of each of the group games at the tournament, we got pairs of poets here to the Poetry Library on Edinburgh's Royal Mile. They shared with us performance poetry and wider chat about the culture of the game. In this best of show, we're going to have a wee look back at some of the highlights. The first game was against the Czech Republic, and for that we got Tam Clark and Erin Boyle in here. Here's some of their best bits. So welcome to the Scottish Poetry Library live at the Euros. I'm joined by Tam and Erin. Welcome both. Erin, how are you?
I'm good, thanks very much, Ali. How are you?
I am top of the bill and I'm buzzing about the game and I'm buzzing about today. Tam, how are you getting on yourself?
Delighted to be here, Ali. Lovely to see you.
Yeah. By way of very brief introduction to today's guests, Tam is a published poet, he's a novelist and he's a very skilled translator. His latest work that'll be out in September is a Scots translation of a series of unfortunate events. Erin has experienced tremendous success over the last few years with recorded videos of her poetry about Celtic and about the Scottish national team. She's currently preparing poetry for her first collection. Guys, obviously you're going to bring us great poetry to start with about the national team. Before we get into that, let's get a wee bit of a blether about your relationship with the national side. Tam, you grew up a Hamilton Accies fan, didn't you? How did the national... You didn't hate a laugh, we leave that to us. How did you get into supporting the national side?
Well, I grew up in the 80s and 90s when Scotland were just, after the heartbreak of 78, it was the twilight of the Idols periods where Scotland were just starting to get gradually
Twilight
worse.
of the Idols.
Aye, this was so... I supported Accies and I supported Accies through all the divisions. Folk I just watched the same quality FIPA, the same standard FIPA, the same players. Folk would say, oh, you're paying Premier Division prices for 4th Division FIPA no matter where Accies are playing or where they're playing. So Scotland were an escape for that for me. And for a lot of folk that didn't support one of the old firm, they were a team that were successful. They were a team moderately successful anyway. They were a team that had big players. They were a team that everybody got behind. And that's what Scotland meant to me as a bairn growing up. It meant something that everybody got behind and it meant something that I could be party that wasn't 200 folk shivering in a shed in Douglas Park. It was the whole country.
Aye.
And that's what Scotland's meant to me then, and it's come to mean that to me again since Serbia. Like after Holyrood, I think Scotland's national team stopped meaning as much as it used to. It stopped being the crux of our national identity because there's so much else going on. And I thought I'd fallen out of love with that. I'd been an adolescent crush that was over. Then Serbia came along and I was just like, I'm smitten again.
That's all fair. So you're saying that until Holyrood, the Parliament came about, basically the Scottish national team was what we expressed our national identity. But after that, there was a wee bit of dwining of the importance of that because we had real ways to express our nationhood.
And it's great because obviously you don't want your national identity to be solely represented by people who only represent 30% of the population in reality. So things have changed, but they've changed in a positive way, I think.
We're running short of time on the stream, so you're going to jump up and give us the poem.
All right, I'll date you that.
Great stuff.
All righty. So this is called Oh Johnny Moscardini. It's about after Rose Riley, the second greatest Scottish player that you maybe haven't heard of. So now they're saying Meredith's the best there's ever been. Last week it's Alan Morton. Next week it's Dixie Dean. You can't talk to writers, but one day they'll talk to me and I'll tell them, Moscardini plays for Campbelltown FC. Oh, Johnny Moscardini, he plays for Campbelltown. He scores the goals as quickly as the ref can write them down. He's got a right bit blooter that had cleared the Irish Sea. Yon Moscardini boy that plays for Campbelltown FC. You didn't want to miss it. You're needing early doon. He wins the toss, he tacks the off. It's 1-0 to the toon. The best defence in Auchintyre. Big jock and shug and Archie. He sucks him in, and then it's bang and ciao, arrivederci. Oh, Johnny Moscardini, he plays for Campbelltown. The other team's got different shirts, but their shorts are brown. Your weaker fit for 30 yards, he scores them with his knee. Yon Moscardini boy that plays for Campbelltown FC. He hits it with his outside foot. It corkscrews through the air. He climbs above defenders like he's running up the stair. He fills the box at corners. He's built like a machine. But when his marker checks for him, he's nowhere to be seen. Oh, Johnny Moscardini, he plays for Campbelltown. If he doesn't skin you this time, well, he'll work his way around. Forget your catenaccio, for this lad's got the key. Yon Moscardini boy that plays for Campbelltown FC. I don't ken how he plays for them. There's bigger clubs instead. He could play for Tobermory. He'd get goals for Gerlock Head. His uncle's got a chippy, but you think he'd get Guy bored? He'd just sitting wrapping suppers in the news, the goals he scored. Oh, Johnny Moscardini, he plays for Campbelltown. He doesn't need a Model T to give the run around. He's fullbacks for his breakfast, haddock singles for his tea. Yon Moscardini boy that plays for Campbelltown FC. I guess one day he'll jack it and give the rest a kick afore they can't hack it and spend weekends on the sick. They'll not be quick to miss him, but in 20 years they'll say that Don Johnny Moscardini was the best they ever played. Oh, Johnny Moscardini, he plays for Campbelltown. He sells the dummies freely, sells the chips for £0.50. We'll never see a better, mamma mia, michty me, than yon boy called Moscardini. Plays for Campbelltown FC.
We're going to take a wee pivot away from the national team just for a second. As you mentioned, Faye Bairn, you've been right the way Celtic through and through. Really recently, I saw you as part of a Celtic marketing campaign punting their season tickets for the coming season. That's obviously a huge place for a fan to get to, but also you got to do it through poetry. So first of all, how did that gig come about? And how are Celtic fans receiving marketing via the form of poetry?
It was such a buzz, and my wee dad, despite the noise on Twitter, which you're going to get anyway, the fact that I was sitting in Celtic Park during the coronavirus pandemic, having that honour to be in that environment again, be in paradise again, was just phenomenal. And I get that it was a wee bit controversial in terms of whatever. But at the end of the day, I'm a woman in football, and if anything, it was just so empowering to have a female face represent the club in that sense. So how it came about, I recently put out a Scott Brown tribute through poetry, of course. And
Aberdeen legend Scott Brown.
I know. Did you see him in the strip the other day?
Sorry, let's focus.
Sorry, I know. I just didn't know it.
Sorry, your tribute to Scott Brown.
Yes, so I'm with the basement. I wrote that poem like I do with all my poetry for myself. It was never intended to go on Twitter. It was my dad that was like, get that out there, do you know what I mean? So that's how it came about. Put that out there, and then I've also been doing a lot of work with More Than 90 Minutes, which is a Celtic fanzine based in Drogheda, but with kind of worldwide coverage, because Celtic fans everywhere, let's face it. And I attended Scott Brown's final fan media press conference, and just before I went to ask him a question, he's like, "You're that wee lassie that did that poem. Thanks so much. I really appreciated it."
Amazing. So Scott Brown in his last conference recognised you.
It was a wee moment that will never leave me. It was just so special. I went and started greeting after the Zoom. It was just brilliant. So stay focused, Erin. So Scott Brown, fan media, and I suppose it just caught Celtic's eye from there, and they've probably had a wee look at the buzz that it's caused on social media, and during COVID it's hard to get heard, I suppose, without it being on social media. Pubs are shut, you can't go to the games, that kind of thing. So I put out a quadruple treble poem about half an hour after the Scott Brown lifted the cup for his final time, and that really kicked off. People really appreciated that. So I think that's how it came about, just people appreciating the poetry.
Lovely. Well, let's get you into the performance area, which again is you standing up, and let's get this poem about the quadruple treble.
I'll look at the right camera this time. Oh Celtic, you've done it again. My tears stream, and it seems that these good times, the glory days, will never end. And it all started when Rogic sent the ball right to the back of the net. We were screaming and greeting like Waynes. History was made. It'll never be done again, the papers say. Make the most of it. But then, treble number 2, the double, Cham and McGregor headering us to history. Hampden's rocking, the pubs are bouncing, the music's playing, and the papers are saying, it'll never be done again. Then treble number 3, a trinity of trebles, and the streets are filled with green and white, what a sight. For the barras to oil rigs to New York City. It's a pity, because it'll never be done again. Now the streets are deserted, and a Celtic echo whistles through paradise of our heroes gone by, fans who sat before us, front row seats of the ghosts of the jungle. Ghosts of legends line up at the tunnel, and it's silent as we watch. From TV screens and iPads, now nothing is what it seems. 2020 is not quite the year that we thought it would be. Our hearts are sore. And tributes pour out to our key workers in the NHS, and no one knows what's coming next. But Celtic, you're always there. Through the good times and the bad, we pray and we keep the faith. Once again, history was made in December. No shorts in Hampden, but Christmas trees, and please, Celtic, make history. Christie fires it to the back of the net, then a penalty, Edwards. Celtic let down their guards, 2-1, then 2-2. Is this just too good to be true? But this was a gift from our heroes gone by, from our loved ones we've lost, watching from the skies. From Tommy Burns and Billy McNeil, Johnston, Chalmers, Thompson, that's why it's so surreal. So let's raise a glass. Celtic, you've done it again. Beautiful Sunday, the 20th of December. Cheers.
Class for Tam and Erin there. That game was a stinker, ended 0-2, Czech Republic getting the win. The next game was the biggie. It was Scotland versus England away down at Wembley. For that we got Kevin Williamson and Victoria McNullty. Here's a wee bit of their best bits. Growing up Celtic, you already mentioned your granddad being a big Celtic man, all that kind of good stuff. Tell us a wee bit more about it's such a massive club. You get 60,000 to the games, but it goes much wider than that. Tell us a bit about that kind of the footballing cultural ecosystem that you grew up in.
Well, so the first game I went to was Mikey Galloway's testimonial. Now it was like a small thing that you would take lanes to, and it was amazing. But even just for a testimonial, the amount of people, green and white everywhere. I remember my uncle buying hats and scarves and anything, badges, just getting you into it. It was for families and for kids. And then when I started to get older and sort of earn my own money, I started to go to games regularly, and there was a whole kind of football and fan culture around Celtic that the fans were politically engaged. They were raising money for different social causes, kind of different left-wing causes. There was a massive kind of Irish diaspora element to Celtic as well, which I think is not often talked about. So I would go to the games, you'd watch it, but we'd go in big groups, and then you would walk along the Gallagate and go into pubs, and it wouldn't just be your pals, it would be their dads, it would be their brothers. You would see the same faces because you went every home game, and it's just completely immersive. And also, round about that time, it was kind of Mark O'Neill, Strachan era, so the games were good and the stadium was full, and you didn't know who was going to win the league, so you were hooked sometimes to the last minute of the whole fixture, and I just loved it, and I'm so glad to have seen Celtic like that actually. So that's why I'm into football. I
can completely understand that. You got a poem you're going to give us, your second poem, I believe is Hunt. Is that right?
Yeah.
If you'd like to take to the performance area and give us that.
Wet waxed your jacket, lightning strike stood tight, prayer hands, mine's pocketed, scarf Arab strapped round frostbit face. It's football in some tin can these days. My breath escaped me. Steam rising for a tray of chips ahead. Christ, I would plough my fingers just to taste that heat. Full time, We pound streets, we feel beat, but we are warriors 1-0 up in the pub. The crowd throbs, Carlton songs, the mandolin choir singing Dreams of 67. This is a game, my friend, but it's no a sport, it's a life spent. And we hunt every Sunday, lay out our dead on Monday's commute. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So I believe our microphone technical's completely fine now, so we can come back to you. You're tuned back in. So you were going to give us a poem. We chatted briefly about the life up in the far north and how vital the national team is up there to the kind of footballing sense of identity and building that kind of sense of belonging to Scotland. We also talked a wee bit about the bevy and how it is quite a big part of the game. It's obviously a huge part of the kind of the fans' experience in Glasgow in a destructive way as well at times. You've got a cracking poem kind of on that. If you want to take the performance area and give us your first team, or if your performance area is your seat.
I'll sit for this one. It's quite a quiet, reflective one. It's about, growing up, I had one football hero above all else, and he was just God, And this is a poem. I met him in Glasgow, actually, just a few years before he died. And he signed a book for us, and he signed one for my dad. And I said to him, I saw you score for the Highbies. And he goes, did I? Oh God, you can't even remember. Anyway, this is him. This is a quite reflective piece. He was. It's called George Best, On the Eve of Destruction. Wrote in 2004. Tomorrow you will die. The whole world knows this, and there are no more excuses. How will the scales cope? The good, the bad, the foolish, and Homeric are all there, weighed in grams and shrugs. Where did it all go wrong? Your epitaph and noose, hung beside an old pair of ruby slippers. But your gift lingers on, like perfume conjured from the dreamiest Belfast air. In terminal decline, you scored 3 times for the Hibs. 1980. I saw one. You cut in from the west stand, stepped to the right, perfect balance, body weight on your left foot, flashed a thunderous shot into the Celtic goal. Some things last forever. Thank you.
So that is something like, obviously alcohol sponsorship's a massive thing in the game. You do see a lot of supporters get quite taken quite hard by the drink. I go on supporters buses and you do sort of think like, geezy peeps, you're like 5 cans in, we're no past Perth yet. How do you feel that does interact? Like, is that a negative part of the national game, or is that just like you're going to have to go along with it?
For me, I love it. I'm being honest. I love going for a bevy before the game. I love going for a bevy after the game. I love going for a bevy on the bus going through to Hampden or wherever we're going, just because it's part of your mates and that's just part of your culture. And I know it's destructive. Everybody knows Scottish alcohol's destructive, but it's just a laugh, It oils the throat for when you get to the game, and that's what I love it. I'm not a good advertisement for Alcohol Anonymous, really.
No, I think it's completely fair. Someone must speak for them. Victoria, what do you think yourself?
I'm kind of the same as you, to be honest. I think it's a bit of crack, and I think that Scotland has massive issues with alcohol, regardless of whether you're a football fan or not. I like the rowdiness of it. I'm not entirely sure any trouble I've maybe seen at football games. Certainly booze has oiled it, but it's not because of drink.
No.
Do you know? So I'm all for it.
All right, booze is acquitted in this court. Kev, your next poem is about the Highbies, about your team.
Well, it's kind of about football in general, really. It's more, what it means. I was trying to be poetic about what it means. Hibs was a very poetic team on the park, allegedly. I remember it once. And it's, so it is it's a love poem to football as well as to, my particular club. It's called To Be Perfectly Frank. Joy without sadness is inconceivable. Just as pleasure without pain can only be a shadow of its own possibilities. Likewise, I need Scotland framed by the neighbours from hell, and my heart torn out by your own fair hands. This is why I stand at Easter Road on a winter's night, with poetry and love in my soul, the moon and the stars in a velvet sky, a world of infinite before me, a world of spectacle around me, and shout, with all that's beautiful and perfect about the human race, get into those Jambo.
That game went alright for Scotland with a 0-0 victory down at Wembley. It all came down to the final match against Croatia, and for that we got the Hampden Collection Mackers, Julie McNeil and Jim Mackintosh. Here's some of their highlights. Jim, we were chatting earlier on about your own Scotland experiences, and your first Scotland game was against Czechoslovakia back in 1973, and you've chucked your microphone out for a bungee jump.
I've just thrown my toys out of the pram there. Yeah. Sorry about that. Are we still live? Eh?
Yeah, no bother.
Yeah, I mean, this is where we show the age gaps of everybody here. September 1973, Scotland, Czechoslovakia, and I was the added on of a bunch of guys organised by my brother, who was 4 years older than me. So him and his pals, 17, 18-year-old, they're all working for local firms, and we borrowed the local tatty merchant's Ford Transit and again double borrowed 2 park benches off the park in Perth. The back of the van was cleared out of tatty sacks and then loaded up with Scotland flags to make a kind of area of poker and pontoon, and me jammed in one corner with a tin of tartan special and told to behave myself. Not really probably realising the actual the occasion. 1973, of course, Scotland were about to qualify for the World Cup, you know. I think if everybody, there was about 100,000 in there that day, and we were in the range, what was known as the Rangers End. And there was Rangers End, which was the covered end, and the Celtic end was the open end at that time. And we were in the Rangers End. But I think if everybody that said they were at that game was there, there'd probably have been about 7.5 million people that were there that night. But we were actually in it, so yeah.
I think they call it the St Johnson end these days, by the way, but that's another story.
Well, I think we just call Hampden Park the St Johnson Park nowadays, don't we? Yeah. So
I've sidetracked you. Back to 1973.
All right, you want to be talking about Scotland again? That'll mean your programme's not long enough to talk about St Johnson. But, and yeah, I mean, it was one of those things we had been warned about. My dad going, oh, this is, you just behave yourselves and all the rest of it, and you know, this is not going to happen, because he was entrenched in the 60s, and off we went. And of course, I came home. In those days, I mean, it was all kind of ash, and you came back, and your sinuses and everything were completely blocked with ash, and you had various aromas of the mixture of what would be thrown over the top of your head, shall we say. And it wasn't just tartan special. Happy memories. So that's 1973.
And you actually got a beautiful poem that kind of brings us back to your early experiences there.
Yeah, I've got a poem which is really a tribute to that, which is called The Toast.
Please tack to the performance area.
Which is a kind of tribute to my dad. He was sort of bizarre. He refused to Flower of Scotland was kind of modern fancy stuff to him. So, which we forget that the Flower of Scotland, although it's now entrenched in all our way of thinking about Scotland, was pretty much a new thing in 1973. In fact, I'm not actually sure we even sung it then. Probably not. It's called The Toast. My dad would always toast the immortal memory, but refused to sing yon fancy Flower of Scotland. With the backs of his flannels quietly overheating, and the heels of his mirror-buffed shoes on the hearth of the burning fire, burning memory of Wembley, he would reel off the 67 11. Of the team, the world champions, he insisted, to his audience of 7 virgins wasting their time. I was the 7th. I was 13, but Hampden bound. So many miles to go in a borrowed transit, flags for carpets, for a card table, my 1 tartan special and 2 park benches with inscribed brass plaques, Jean and Jim fae Tulloch, Betty fae Letham. Unaware their view over the park would shift from gentle hush to full-throated blaze as Joe Jordan rose to iconoclasm, and the holier joy that his toothless grin bestowed on all of us heading into the dark beyond Mount Florida. When will we see your likes again? To stand against them, to wear the jersey with pride and send us homeward. In Ford Transit sic Gloria, aff on Monday. Aye, he would toast the memory still, refuse to sing Flower of Scotland, but maybe now would add a drap more in the glass to Willie Ormond, before the smell of burning flannel would change the subject forever.
Julie, there's been loads of chat. I've been doing it myself in some of these broadcasts about, oh, Scotland back at the Euros, Scotland back in a major tour for the first time in 150 billion year. But actually, Scotland were back in the World Cup in 2019, and you were there. It was the Scottish women's national team got there and did absolutely no bad at all to get in the first place. Went there and performed, and you went over to see it. What was it like?
Oh, I think it's one of the best experiences of my entire life. So my little girl was 6 at the time, and these, I mean, first of all, at Hampden, she went to the last game at Hampden, there was 18,000 people, which for a women's game at Hampden is huge, you know, so this huge crowd to send our girls off to France. And then the experience of, you know, flying to France, dodgy driving in Paris to get to the Parc des Princes, and then we all marched with the Tartan Army in the rain, we're singing Flower of Scotland, walking, do you know what I mean? The whole experience even before the game was just phenomenal. And then just being able to see it through her eyes was wonderful. You know, she's 6 years old, she's watching her national team, women, taking 3 goals off Argentina, being just absolutely fierce lions out there on the pitch. And it was fabulous, but it's that thing about football, isn't it? It's these highs and lows. So, you know, there's her just, you know, really relishing Erin Cuthbert's goal and, you know, running up and down with her flag. And then there's my son in tears at the end at the result because it was so cruel at the end of that game. But it was just one of the best experiences as a family that we've ever had. It was absolutely wonderful.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
And like the world that your 6-year-old has grown into is radically different to the one that I grew into. Or you grew into.
And I think it makes it possible for her. You know, it makes, if you can see it, you can be it. It's that thing for girls, isn't it? And she's looking at these amazing role models and she's thinking, I could do that one day. And she's a great wee footballer, so she maybe could.
100%, 100%. And you have a poem about that experience. Please, back to the performance area.
So I wrote this one. Shelley Kerr was asked before the Finland game if the girls were feeling the pressure. And it got me thinking about pressure in football and, you know, kind of what it takes to get to that level if you're a woman in football. So this is about this. Pressure. When he asks if we're feeling the pressure, the answer is we've felt it all our lives. Just the right amount to squeeze a pal's hand when she is breaking, or to cup my daughter's face and tell her she's more than good enough. The extra hours spent burning the midnight oil to prove you're just as smart as them, to then get up and burn that oil again. The pressure in your legs as you drive hard towards the goal, determined you will earn your place as the team's one and only girl. The pressure to look or feel or be as they'd expect. Nothing more and nothing less. So when he asks if we're feeling the pressure of a nation on our backs, our answer is aye, but we girls know a thing or two about that.
Honestly, it's so pleasing to hear that kind of gear. Like, this is what football poetry is all about. You know, attaching all these different resonances, bringing all these different sides to the game. Yeah. I kind of didn't have loads of time left in the broadcast, so we're going to move on to the next conversation point, which is, we've been in lockdown for I think 1 billion years now.
Yeah,
and and football's been obviously very weird. It's been these big echoey empty stadia, like effectively any cups won over this time are null and void. It didn't really count. And you've
said that.
but
we're live, so I can reply to that.
No, sorry, we're focused here, Jim. Thank you.
Focus.
And, so you have obviously been seeing a different side What's football been to you during
Yeah, I mean, I
lockdown?
think the thing is, you're right, and it's grim, and we're not at games, and we're not cheering on our teams, and we're not being able to go to training. My kids are not in with the football teams, but I think for me, it's like football hasn't stopped during that time. You know, I think it's the thing that's kept my kids sane through the last 18 months. I mean, my daughter's been balling up her socks in the kitchen and running around putting cones out. My son's been doing laps of the garden and practicing his Cruyff turn. You know, I think football just happens. It doesn't have to be organised in the way that we think it does. But also, I think I just want to shout out to the clubs, especially the community clubs that my kids are involved in, because you know, they've been doing Zoom fitness sessions, they've been doing collections for food banks, they've been raising money to make visors and hand sanitizers and all. I mean, there's been so much good stuff that's gone on, and that for me, that's one of the reasons I'm involved in football. It's the community element, it's what you're doing for your communities, it's what you're doing for your kids, and actually, I think that has been one of the most inspiring things this year for me.
Beautiful. Absolutely. And you've got a poem that you're going to give for us, and that is
do.
the whistle. So back to the performance area.
Okay.
Lovely, lovely.
The whistle. The only for outdoors ball thuds, smacking off the freshly painted walls. A FIFA-induced din and despair, and a floor strewn with Match Attax collectibles. The small boy laps the garden, arms aloft, executing his first Cruyff turn round the washing pole. Dad teaches him Archie Gemmell's 78 for PE. Strips, pulled over jammies, navigating mops of hair, socks long forgotten to get your daily dose of air. The referee blew time, and the world held its breath. But on the sidelines, nothing really stopped. Rainbows appeared everywhere, in chalk, in paint, in packages on doorsteps left with care in place of hugs and being there. The young girl lays out cones around the kitchen and balls up socks to play. The boy laughs on Zoom at pictures of his teammates as new babes, and the ball rolls on from home to home across the globe. It sprinkles hope as we find new ways to be together while we hold our breath and wait.
Thanks very much for joining the Scottish Poetry Library for this Euro special. Mind and subscribe to our YouTube channel for loads more of this kind of content, and follow us all across the social media. Cheers.